Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Honeybees pollinate our vegetables. Today we're going to hear some of the latest research and information on these important insects. Also, it's about time to plant fruit trees. Find out how to do it. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is David Glover. Mr. David is the Bartley Bee Whisperer, and Mr. D is here.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we love talking about bees, Mr. David. You know that.
Oh, I love it. You got to have bees for your gardens. You got to have bee for harvest time. Yeah. No bees, no squash. No bees, no pumpkins.
There it goes. I mean, bees are that important for sure. What do you have for us today on the table?
Well, on the table I've got honey, which we normally see. This came from Germantown Farm Park.
Okay.
We recently harvested, and here is honey also. Unlike that one.
Wow.
This is creamed honey. Natural honey granulates, and if you control the granulation, you get a smooth, creamy honey. This is good for kids. It's not going to drip on the counters.
I think that's pretty neat. What you think about that, Mr. D? That's all right.
No mess, man. That's
Pretty good. Now, let's hear some of the latest bee information that's out there for us.
You know, there's information, there's infotainment.
Okay, yeah.
And I've been going through the numbers that we've gotten from 2016, 2017 on our bee losses.
Okay.
The state of Tennessee lost about 49% of our bees. That sounds scary until you start actually looking at the pool that they drew that information from. State of Tennessee, we have about less than 60 beekeepers report. Okay? People who report are the ones who are actually experiencing loss.
Sure.
In Shelby County, we have more than 500 beekeepers.
Wow.
And so we've got less than 1% showing up.
Yeah.
And in the nation, we lost about 33% of our bees. Now, since I've been keeping bees, we were about 2.5 million colonies. We got up to 2.7 million colonies. We dropped back down to 2.62. And this year, we're at 2.89. The numbers I work off of to see how our bees are doing are the USDA NASS report. That comes out April 1st. It comes out quarterly, but the April 1st numbers are the ones that I watch.
Okay.
Because that's just as we're getting into spring, just as we're getting to hitting the harvest, not the harvest, but the pollination series. We need the bees for that. We do lose bees throughout the year, but the biggest number of bee losses happens with our migratory beekeepers who are taking bees all over. And when you have a large congregation of bees in one area, they're very social. They share what they have. And if that happens to be a disease, it gets shared. If it happens to be a mite, it gets shared. The USDA and the Bee Informed Partnership has said that the #1 killer of our bees is the varroa mite. And that is a communicable mite, sort of like lice, you know, things of that nature, except it's for bees. And it vectors more than 20 different diseases.
Wow.
And if we can control that mite, we control colony collapse. And the & 2 is starvation.
Starvation.
Still. Now, another report that came out just within the last month came from Europe. It's a pan-European study of neonicotinoids. Right. And everybody freaks out when we talk about pesticides, because pesticides kill everything.
Yeah, right.
And my take on the study, it was the UK, Hungary, and Germany. And they inoculated, or they coated rapeseed, planted it, and then put the bees in the middle of those fields. UK and Hungary had severe losses, and the losses were anything from the bees not being able to reproduce to the bees just dying. Germany experienced no losses. And as you read through the report, you're hearing about all these things that the neonicotinoids did. You get to the bottom of the report, and it says, and these numbers may be skewed because Germany had strong hives, and the bees had another source of pollen and nectar that they could go to. So, you take something, put it in the middle of a field, and they have nothing else to eat, nothing else to do. They're going to die. If all you have is cyanide, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Germany had no losses. So in the United States, I'm still pushing hard. Any problems with your bees can be solved with a strong, healthy colony, not diseased.
Not diseased. Okay.
UK and Hungary had diseased bees in the study. Okay, you got diseased bees, and now you're feeding them something that might kill them or hurt them. They're going to die faster than a strong hive that has other sources of food around them.
So how far are neonics on the list then?
They didn't make the top 10. I mean, that's the USDA reporting. 2015, 2016, neonics was a little subline. Pesticides may be causing some of our bee losses. That's what, really? Maybe?
Maybe.
Didn't make the top 10. Things to think about.
Yeah.
I've been telling you, ever since I've started coming to visit y'all, varroa mites.
Varroa mites. And you have been
We
saying
control that. In Tennessee, small hive beetles. I want to control those too.
How do you control the varroa mite?
We have a bunch of different things that we can put out. There's Apistan, Apivar, even oxalic acid, wood bleach. You mix the wood bleach in with sugar water, and there's actually a formula that you use it. And you drizzle it across the cluster of bees. It coats the bees with sugar water, it gets on the mites, it kills the mites. And you have to do that on a 3-week slide because you want to make sure that you catch all the bees that are hatching out. You're going to go all the way and go 6 weeks, but you also don't want to do it when you're harvesting honey. So October 1st is when I'm going to start treating my bees.
Okay.
It's not a pesticide, it's something natural. By the way, they did a study recently on the wax. Wax is very absorbent. It's a lipid protein, so it absorbs everything. And you can do spectrum analysis on the wax to see what's in there. This was 2012. The main thrust of the study was the pesticides and the sides that were in there were beekeeper originated and trying to control mites.
Trying to control the mites.
And it wasn't coming from the fields. We kill a lot more bees
Yeah.
than John Doe out there.
Wow. Okay. I see you pondering something there, Mr.
Well,
B.
I'm just saying, not necessarily error. In some cases, just you're grabbing at straws to try
Right.
to control
In
it.
a lot of ways they are, and every once in a while we'll hear of a new thing from one of the other beekeepers. Have you tried this? And they're like, does that have a label? And that's an important thing.
Right.
Very
Yeah.
If it hasn't been labeled by a control, the EPA,
Right.
then you really don't know what you're putting in your bees.
And you got a food source here, and you know,
Got a good food
human
source.
food source, and or human food, and so you got to be really careful.
Yeah,
You better follow that label.
this is regulated. It is food.
Mr. David, that's some good stuff, man.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you for being here with that.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, thank you much. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Mr. D, let's talk a little bit about planting fruit trees. Okay, so what do we need to start with that? Is this the time of the year to be doing that?
This is the time of the year to be really getting involved in planting fruit trees. It's not the time of the year to stick the trees in the ground.
Okay, good. Good.
But it is the time of the year to be preparing your soil, making sure that your pH is right, and choosing the varieties that you're going to plant, and choosing, whether, doing research on figuring out whether or not that you need pollinators, figuring out how many you need, to feed a family of 5 or whatever, or depending on what you want to do with them. Going out and choosing the site, and now is the time to do that. You can do some site prep. Burn down, you can control some weeds and grasses, go ahead and get it ready to do that. I've got some information that might help with that a little bit. Get my glasses on here. Auburn has a real good publication.
Yeah, he knows all about that.
And I've copied a few things from the publication, and it's entitled Fruit Culture in Alabama. And if you have a sloped area and you're planting rows, don't plant your rows up and down the hills. Plant them on the contour, because you don't want to, increase the chances of gullies forming and things like that. In a landscape situation, you don't have to pay a lot of attention to the space things that I'm about to mention, because you can kind of strategically place these, trees around, to, kind of help the aesthetic nature of your landscape. But if you have this is for a family of 5, tree fruits and nuts, 5 to 8 apples, and they recommend the semi-dwarf apples. 5 to 8 peaches if you want to go that route. 5 to 8 plums, 2 to 4 persimmons, 3 to 5 pear trees, 4 to 6 pecan trees. I really don't understand that on the pecans. On the spacings on the semi-dwarf apples, 15 to 25 feet apart.
Okay.
Because they're going to spread, and you want to be able to get between them with your, especially with your riding lawnmower or your bush hog and your sprayer and all that. Peaches, 20 by 20 or 15 by 20. The plums, same as peaches, 20 by 20. Anytime there's a choice, if you've got the room, go to the more distance between it, because it's amazing how fast those trees will
spread out.
Overlap.
Okay.
But pecans, 60 by 60.
Wow.
And that's some of the older pecan trees. There are some precocious varieties, some smaller pecans that you can plant a little bit closer than that. Pears, 20 by 20 or 25 by 30. And some of the pear trees get a lot bigger. On pollination, most apples need to be pollinated. Some of the yellow delicious varieties are self-fruitful. Pecans are wind pollinated. Pecans need pollination. You need a type 1 with a type 2 pecan tree. Plums and peaches and nectarines are self-fruitful, so you don't need pollinators for that. Pears need cross-pollination, so you need 2 varieties of pear trees.
So when it comes down to planting them, though, how do you go about it?
Okay, planting. Okay, we've done all that.
Okay.
You've chosen your varieties, you've ordered them, you've got them coming, and the smaller plants you can get, the better off you are, in my opinion. 2-year-old plants are plenty big. So go out, you want to dig a planting hole. If you've got bare root plants, it doesn't have to be that big a hole. It doesn't need to be that deep. But the most important thing when you're planting any fruit tree is that you make sure that you plant it no deeper than the depth that it grew in the nursery. And if it's a grafted plant, usually you got 2 or 3 inches of rootstock visible above the ground. And you can see where the graft, took and came out. You don't want to cover that up, because if you plant it too deep, it'll die. I mean, it will not that it won't do well, it'll die, because the above ground portion of a plant is supposed to stay above ground. Don't mulch it, don't pile mulch up against it. The above ground portion of a hardwood plant is supposed to stay above ground. It needs air. And if you put it below the ground, it will die. And I can't repeat that enough. If you do not use a post hole digger to dig a planting hole for a tree, I don't care if it's a little bitty tree, do not use a post hole digger, because you're going to want to dig it deeper than it needs to be dug. Use a shovel. like a dirty shovel. Use a shovel. Dig a wide planting hole, not a deep planting hole. Dig a wide planting hole, and dig it the depth that if it's in a container, a pot, dig it and take it out of the pot and set it down. And if it goes down an inch, take it out, add dirt to the bottom, and get it so that it is the same depth that it grew in the nursery. And then you bring the dirt, around, put the topsoil. If it's got any grass or anything, I crumble that up, put it down first, and then try to make a little kind of dam well out away from the stem or the base of the plant, so that when it rains, everything's going to settle down a little bit. Keep that in mind. And if you dug it way too deep, and then you had to add a lot of soil in the bottom, that's going to settle down, and then it's going to wash in on it again. So keep that in mind. You'll actually want it up a little higher
Right.
if you have a lot of loose
right.
soil in the bottom of your planting hole.
Right. And put the native soil back in the hole, right?
the
Because it
native
doesn't have to
soil.
be amended.
That's right. It doesn't have to be amended. No, I mean, just put the native soil right back in the hole. Okay. But do that, and you don't have to stake it.
Yeah.
If the plant is, if it's a peach plum or a nectarine, cut them off at 20 to 25 inches. If it's an apple or pear, it would be 25 inches. All you're doing is you're telling that plant where the first limbs, you want them to come out.
Okay.
And then if you've got a real tall tree, cut it down. I bring it down.
Let me ask you this though: how do you pick the right tree for your area, for your landscape?
I go to choosing
tell us.
varieties for Tennessee, tree fruit, small fruit cultivars for Tennessee. PB 746, Dr. Lockwood up in Knoxville put together a great publication.
Yeah.
And in it, he's got peaches, the varieties that are good for Tennessee, and there's a bunch of them. I'm not going to read them all unless you want me to.
We can get them on the website.
Okay, we put them on the website. Apples, okay, I've got 4 pages of peaches, okay?
Wow.
Apples, there's not as many apples. Apples do better in higher altitudes. We're here in West Tennessee, in the Mid-South, our altitude is the lowest it is anywhere in the state of Tennessee, but we can still grow apples. And the thing I like about this publication, it also tells you about the problems. And there are problems.
And they're going to be
run
problems.
into fire blight and brown rot in peaches, plums, and nectarines. There's one section in the apples that has disease-resistant apples.
Good.
And in a home situation, I would probably recommend that. And keep in mind, resistance is resistance. Resistance is not proof. But this publication will tell you what varieties that have proven that will work in Tennessee.
So, Mr. D, when do we plant fruit trees?
Late winter, late February, early March is the best time, in my opinion, to put them in the ground.
All right.
That's an opinion I'd listen to.
I would too. Thank you much, Mr. D. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Looking at our blueberry here, looks like it's kind of putting the brakes on, getting ready for winter time. Got a little weed here, a little tree that's trying to grow. We'll get that out of the way. I'm not going to really do anything to it at this point. I am going to prune the dead limbs out of it. It's got 2 or 3 dead limbs here. I don't know why they died, but we're going to go on and get them out of the way. That's one. Do the same thing with this other limb over here. And then we have one, like a 4-inch shoot here, and I'm not even going to get it. I'm going to try to stay out of the green tissue. Just take that off. Did a pretty good job with that. And I'm just going to leave that alone. If the leaves are starting to change color, days are getting shorter, we're getting closer to fall. One thing you definitely do not want to do is apply fertilizer right now. We don't want a flush of new growth because, believe it or not, in a few weeks we're probably going to get a killing frost. It's 90 degrees out here today, and we're probably going to get a killing frost within 3 weeks or so. But in the fall of the year, we don't do a lot with blueberries.
All right, here's our Q&A session. Mr. David, you jump in and help us out, okay?
I'll try.
All right, here's our first viewer email. Will Granny Smith trees grow and produce in the Memphis area? If so, what is a second variety that will cross-pollinate with them? And this is from Danny right here in Cordova. So we just got through talking about fruit trees.
We
so
did.
Granny Smith, of course, apples, and he wants to know, will they grow here and produce?
They
in this
will.
area?
They are one of the varieties that was on that long list that I did not read to you, and they'll grow here. They will have problems, fire blight and things like that. So I would probably get one of the more disease-resistant varieties to cross-pollinate,
Okay.
and you ought to be okay.
Do you have a couple of those you can read off real quick? Just
Yeah,
something
let me
we
do
might
that.
be familiar
Let me do
with a
that. You might want to be prepared to spray the Granny Smith.
Oh,
Let me read the Granny Smith. Let me read a little bit about that. Fruit ripens late, stores well, may develop an orange blush on the side that's exposed to the sun if it's allowed to hang. Trees are willowy, somewhat difficult to train, and they're susceptible to scab, fire blight, cedar apple rust, and powdery mildew.
Wow.
So you may have to spray them. The disease-resistant apples I mentioned are Red Free, Liberty, Freedom, Enterprise, and Gold Rush. The yellow varieties seem to be better pollinators, and Gold Rush is the only one of these that's yellow. And let me read you a little bit about Gold Rush. Tree is highly resistant to scab and powdery mildew, moderately resistant to fire blight. Fruit is sweet, crisp, and good for fresh and processing. Ripens late, keeps very well. So you may want to go that route.
All right, Mr. Danny, hope that helps you out. From Mr. D himself. All right, here's our next viewer email. I have mealybugs on my hostas and coleus. Is there anything I could do at the end of the season to keep mealybugs from coming back next year? And this is from Miss Kathleen right here in Memphis. So, mealybugs. She wants to try to get rid of them the next season, right? Practice good sanitation. It's going to be one because they're going to overwinter in crop residue. Okay, that's one thing you need to do. But here's the second thing, Mr. D. You know about this. How about late winter, early spring dormant oil application? That way you can help get rid of the eggs or alien dose crawlers that might be out there.
That's true.
So that's the route I would go with that. And of course you have to read the label, you know, to make sure that you have the right proportions, you know, with the oil mix.
Yeah.
I think that'll do the trick.
Yep, and that's about all that I know. You know, that the systemic insecticides don't do very well with mealybugs. But that, and then there are contact killers that you can use when.
Yeah, I mean you can use
you have to use them early.
When insecticidal
larvae
soap
are very
would be
small.
one. Neem oil is another one that you can use. They are contact, but I would use those early. But I would, you know, late winter, early spring, I would do the dormant oil application.
Yeah.
And just follow the label on that, and that should get you covered, Miss Kathleen. All right, so here's our next viewer email. How can I keep my plants from dying back every winter? Last year, a winter hardy gardenia looked awful all winter, but when I went to pull it up, it had new growth, so I left it and it looks nice again. It was supposed to be hardy to 5 degrees. Can I spray plants with some sort of horticultural oil to help them? Also, I have some mahonias that seem to take winter on the chin. I don't want things to keep dying back every year. And this is from Miss Nancy. So how can we help Miss Nancy with that?
Cover them up.
I would just cover them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but don't leave it on. Cover them, and when the cold snaps come in, cover them with something that has a little bit of insulation, you know, and make sure the soil underneath them is wet, is moist, and because moist soil gives off heat better than dry soil, gives off more heat than dry soil. But just try to do a good job of covering them.
And we always hear the term winter hardy. I mean, what does that mean to you, hardy?
Well, the fact that this gardenia is still alive, you know, that's winter hardy.
Yeah.
You know,
It's like disease resistant.
yeah.
Right, and we're actually at the point where you can just about get by with growing gardenias in this area. Just about. I mean, but they can get nipped if we have some bad winters, without a doubt. But yeah, I just cover those up, and I'll cover them all the way to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people just throw like blankets and things just right over the top of them, but you still allowing air, to come up through there.
Make it like a teepee.
Ah, okay.
You know where it's broad at the bottom and more narrow at the top, and it's okay to have breathable, mama's old quilt or blanket or something like that.
Right.
Black plastic and is probably one of the least desirable covers. Get something, an old tarp or something. I mean, you're going to have some ways of supporting it. You don't want whatever you put on there to be so heavy that it'll crush to the ground.
Right.
But something with a little bit of insulating factor. And there's some products out there on the market that have a little bit of thickness to them.
Right. Right. So yeah, you're right. Just cover it. Now, yeah,
You
this
need to take it off though. I mean,
Yeah, make sure
when
you
the
take it off.
temperatures warm
Right.
up the next
Right.
day, and it may
Needs to
mean
come
that you
off.
have to cover up at night and then take it off
Right.
in the middle of the
That's a
day.
good
If it
point.
gets above freezing, take it off. And
Good point.
if you just leave it on there, then you're doing more harm than good.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned that. And she, talked about spraying with an oil.
That's not gonna. I mean,
It's not gonna help.
That's how we control unwanted birds. We spray them with oil, and it makes them freeze to death, right? And that's one of the ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
All right, so Miss Nancy, there you have it. Okay, hope that helps you out. So, Mr. D, Mr. David, we're out of time. It's
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. There are links to the honeybee studies and the fruit tree planting publication at familyplotgarden.com. We have links to information and guides on these topics and many others. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.
Said that the number one killer of our bees is the varroa mite, and that is a communicable mite, sort of like lice, things of that nature, except it's for bees. And it vectors more than 20 different diseases.
Wow.
And if we can control that mite, we control colony collapse. And the number two is starvation.
Starvation.
Still. Now, another report that came out just within the last month came from Europe. It's a pan-European study of neonicotinoids. Right. And everybody freaks out when we talk about pesticides, because pesticides kill everything.
Yeah, right.
And my take on the study, it was the UK, Hungary, and Germany. And they inoculated, they coated rapeseed, planted it, and then put the bees in the middle of those fields.
Therefore,
there's information, there's infotainment.
Okay, yeah.
And I've been going through the numbers that we've gotten from 2016, 2017 on our bee losses.
Okay.
The state of Tennessee lost about 49% of our bees. That sounds scary until you start actually looking at the pool that they drew that information from. State of Tennessee, we have about less than 60 beekeepers report. Okay? Yeah. People who report are the ones who are actually experiencing loss.
Sure.
In Shelby County, we have more than 500 beekeepers.
Wow.
And so we've got less than 1% showing up. Yeah. And in the nation, we lost about 33% of our bees. Now, since I've been keeping bees, we were about 2.5 million.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we love talking about bees, Mr. David. You know that.
Oh, I love it. You got to have bees for your gardens. You got to have bee for harvest time. Yeah. No bees, no squash. No bees, no pumpkins.
There it goes. I mean, bees are that important for sure. What do you have for us today on the table?
Well, on the table, I've got honey, which we normally see. This came from Germantown Farm Park.
Okay.
We recently harvested, and here is honey also. Unlike that one.
Wow.
This is creamed honey. Natural honey granulates, and if you control the granulation, you get a smooth, creamy honey. This is good for kids. It's not going to drip on the counters.
I think that's pretty neat. What you think about that, Mr. D? That's
No mess, man. That's
pretty good. Now, let's hear some of the latest bee information that's out. Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Honeybees pollinate our vegetables. Today, we're going to hear some of the latest research and information on these important insects. Also, it's about time to plant fruit trees. Find out how to do it. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is David Glover. Mr. David is the Bartley Bee Whisperer, and Mr. D is here.
Colonies. We got up to 2.7 million colonies. We dropped back down to 2.62, and this year we're at 2.89. The numbers I work off of to see how our bees are doing are the USDA NASS report. That comes out April 1st. It comes out quarterly, but the April 1st numbers are the ones that I watch.
Okay.
Because that's just as we're getting into spring, just as we're getting to hitting the harvest, not the harvest, but the pollination series. We need the bees for that. We do lose bees throughout the year, but the biggest number of bee losses happens with our migratory beekeepers who are taking bees all over. And when you have a large congregation of bees in one area, they're very social. They share what they have. And if that happens to be a disease, it gets shared. If it happens to be a mite, it gets shared. The USDA and the Bee Informed Partnership has